Good afternoon. My name is Susanna Gurr, and I'm the Managing Director at the BC Centre for Employment Excellence. On behalf of my colleagues at the Centre, I would like to welcome you to today's webinar. Today's presentation provides an overview along with some important insights and practical knowledge about disability-related employment needs assessments. It showcases tools developed and implemented by the Open Door Group. The need for better training and awareness of assessment tools among practitioners has been well documented and voiced. During the Centre's ongoing consultations with stakeholders, one of the most popular requests we received is for the development of resources to aid practitioners in enhancing their knowledge and skill in using assessment tools with their clients, especially individuals with disabilities. I will tell you more about the presentation and introduce our presenters in a few minutes. As usual, we will start with a question. Please take a moment to answer the poll on your screen. If you're participating with a colleague or in a group, please select the most appropriate or common answer. We will close the poll in a few minutes or so and let you know the results. For those of you who are not familiar with the Centre, it was created in 2012 with funding from the provincial and federal governments to act as a research and knowledge sharing organization for BC employment service providers and employers. The Centre's mandate is not only to do innovative research, but also to find ways to share best practices with BC practitioners and employers and better integrate evidence into practice. We created this webinar series as a way to reach out and connect with practitioners. Through this series, we have highlighted new research by the Centre, but are also tapping into the knowledge and expertise within the employment services community as we are doing today. You're invited to view the video recordings of previous webinars that we have posted on our website. The results of the poll are in. The question, in your current capacity, using a 5-point scale, what is the level of confidence you have in your ability to deliver a disability-related employment needs assessment? About 20% indicated they're not very confident, and 5% of participants here indicated they're very confident. So most are in the middle range, 38% in the moderate confident range. So I think you will find today's webinar very useful and informative. It features DRENA, which stands for Disability-Related Employment Needs Assessment, and key in being able to efficiently and effectively support a client who identifies or presents as having a disability and may require disability-related service and or supports in order to achieve labor market attachment. With over 40 years of direct experience providing employment-related disability services, Open Door Group has created DRENA tools that take qualified staff through the process of identifying individualized services and support needs of this specific population. And in fact, it's been incorporating both client and practitioners' advice and use in order to update it and to get it to this point. We have 3 presenters speaking to us from Kamloops, and it's my pleasure to introduce them. First, we have Naomi Bullock, the Executive Director of Program Management and Development at Open Door Group. Naomi has almost 2 years of experience working with multiple barrier clients and persons with disabilities. Much of this has been in the employment service sector. Naomi has been working at Open Door Group for the past 10 years in a variety of positions, with over 4 of these years providing direct vocational rehab services to persons with disability so they may achieve employment success. Over the past 6 years, Naomi has been working in a director and executive director capacity, developing employment service-related tools and programming specific to serving this population as well as other specialized population groups. She has developed and provided training on working with persons with disabilities. Naomi is joined by her colleague, Kathy Cohen, from the Kamloops Shore South Shore BC Employment Service Center. Kathy is a vocational counselor of disabilities and addictions. She has over 13 years of experience providing vocational rehabilitation services for people with disabilities and over 20 years of experience working with people with disabilities. She has a Bachelor of Social Work degree and has been with the Open Door Group since 2002. It is also very important to hear the client's view so we understand how the services are received and what works. We are very pleased to have Michelle with us to share her experience with the types of supports she received from the Open Door Group and how they helped her along the path back to paid work. Michelle's story started with an accident back in the early 1990s that left her unable to pursue the career for which she was trained. Michelle had to look at different employment choices, and she was committed to trying different jobs to support herself and family. The rehabilitation injuries took many years, and she also sustained new injuries about 4 years ago. She connected with the Open Door Group around fall of 2014 and learned about various options available to help her return to work, options that she wasn't aware of. Michelle will tell us more about her experience later. Before I start, I should note that the presentation will last about 90 minutes, followed by a question and answer period. We encourage you at any time during the presentation to use the questions feature on your dashboards to submit questions or comments you may have for the presenters to discuss during the discussion period, and we will take breaks at several points in the presentation. This will be facilitated by my colleague, Greg. Feel free to ask more than one question. I know the presenters would love to engage in discussions with you and to exchange thoughts on this area. And now it's my pleasure to hand the microphone over to Naomi in Kamloops.
I'm very pleased to be here. Oh, sorry, I'm now unmuted, so you didn't hear my opening. I'm Naomi Bolick, and I want to thank Susanna for that wonderful introduction. I have the agenda up here on the screen, so I just want to go over some of the things that we'll be discussing today. There will be periods throughout the presentation where you'll have an opportunity to bring forward some questions. So I want to put up this agenda so you can see what we're going to be covering, because it may be covered later on in the presentation. So firstly, we're going to be talking about what the DRENA is and who can do the DRENA, or who is recommended to do the DRENA, what type of client should or shouldn't receive a DRENA. We're also going to introduce some best practices around introducing the DRENA service to a client. And then we're going to go over a thorough review of the tool that we've developed at Open Door Group. After that's complete, Kathy Collins is going to present a case study with her client, Michelle, who is here today. So we're very, very fortunate to have her here. And then after the case study, we will talk about what you should be doing after you complete the DRENA. So what are some typical services that you may refer a client to, or what would be the next steps after that process? And then finally, I will give you some information on how you can order the tool to use in your own agencies. Just to give you a heads up, the tool will be available for order by Thursday. Okay, so just to go over what the DRENA is, I'm just going to move something on my screen here, because it's blocking what I need to see. So Open Door Group has over 39 years of direct experience providing employment-related disability services. And through this experience, we have created a DRENA tool that assists staff through the process of identifying individualized service and support needed for this specific population. So the DRENA tool was really developed based on the employment program of BC. I really want to make note, though, however, that this DRENA form is adaptable to agencies that work outside of EPBC, and we have created an adaptable version so that it doesn't reference specific EPBC services. So So what is the DRENA? The DRENA is a key service in being able to efficiently and effectively identify employment-related disability supports or services for clients with disabilities. The DRENA tool that we've developed facilitates the assessment process by assisting the case manager to identify and confirm if there are specific disability-related factors that may impact on their client's ability to achieve labor market attachment, including any required services, supports, accommodations, and or other employment considerations. So this is a visual of our DRENA wheel that we developed, and this is the foundation of our tool. So the DRENA wheel guides the case manager and the client through 4 quadrants, as you can see on this image. The sections in each of the quadrants are designed to engage the client in discussion about their disability from a holistic perspective, so how it impacts them in all areas of their daily living and work. The first 2 quadrants are specifically related to the individual's disability. In these sections, the intent is to really explore and understand the client's disability and its associated symptoms. The last 2 quadrants explore how their disability impacts their general life functioning and begins exploring potential work-related accommodations and supports, including natural supports, that will mitigate the potential impact of a client's disability on employment. Throughout the delivery of this tool, case managers it's also expected that they observe the client's body language, their responses to questions, for example, ability to process and comprehend questions, eye contact, attention, etc., to ensure a thorough generalized assessment of the individual's disability and potential impact on employment. All of these sections together provide a comprehensive snapshot of the client's disability, potential impact of their disability on employment, and recommendation for service and support. Later in this presentation, I will be going through each of the sections in detail on the actual form, so you'll get a chance to see that. So who should typically be performing a DRENA? And so a DRENA should typically be formed by a staff person who has some experience and or is comfortable working with people with disabilities, experience and is comfortable in soliciting highly sensitive information through a conversationally driven interview process, experience and is comfortable in expanding on lines of questioning to ensure they are achieving all the details needed to make an informed decision regarding recommended disability services and support, and experience and is proficient in observing and interpreting body language, responses, processing speed, etc., that will provide a more in-depth understanding about the client than just what they are self-reporting. As the DRENA tool is a conversationally driven process and provides details related to service recommendations and their workplace accommodations, having a vast knowledge of disabilities is not entirely necessary. What is more important when engaging in this tool is having really strong interview skills and being comfortable and open to working with this population. Being able to expand on responses that are being provided by the client is absolutely key in order to fully understand the individual's disability and potentially needed services and supports moving forward. So DRENAs, determining client eligibility and need for a DRENA. DRENAs are intended to be used for those clients who self-identify or have medical verification of a disability and are not fully aware of how their disability may impact on their employment. It's also suitable for clients who you observe as potentially having an undiagnosed disability through your service interactions. DRENAs are not recommended for clients that identify as having a disability but have strong self-awareness regarding their disability and are able to articulate and or demonstrate how they have managed it in past work experiences. Clients that identify as having a disability but their disability has no impact on their employment readiness. Clients that identify as having a disability but do not agree to needing disability-specific services or supports. And clients that don't have a disability or are not suspected of having a disability. Due to the sensitivity of the information being collected in the DRENA tool, clients need to be open and willing to participate in the service in order for it to be effective. So just to keep that in mind. So when would you typically facilitate a DRENA with a client? A DRENA can be performed at any time with a case-managed client. However, it is generally facilitated shortly after the completion of the multidimensional needs assessment for all those EPBC providers out there, or after a service intake process. Questioning during the MD&A or service intake process should reveal general information regarding any potential disability-related barriers to employment or service participation that may trigger your consideration of this service. However, if a client has an undiagnosed disability, necessity of this service may present at a later date. For example, you may observe the client is presenting symptoms typical of a disability, at which point you may introduce the service to the client for further exploration later on in your service delivery with them. So we're just going to talk a little bit about best practice approaches when introducing the DRENA to your client. So you always want to introduce the DRENA to your client when you've identified that they would potentially benefit from this service. Explain why you use this tool and what you would use it for. When you've identified that a client would potentially benefit from the service, explain to them that because they identified as having certain health conditions and are challenges to employment, this is an additional service that you can provide to help determine and implement additional services, support, and/or workplace accommodations that will help them achieve and maintain their employment goals. Ensure you're clear that this information will not be shared with an employer without their prior consent. That's usually what, from our experience, that's usually what makes our clients the most nervous. Always be transparent during the process. Always ensure you are including your client when you're brainstorming service recommendations, workplace accommodations, and those types of supports together. Be sure to explain the process of achieving approval for these services and supports, if applicable, so your client isn't assuming they are a guarantee. And also be aware that you may experience resistance regarding the sensitivity of some of the questions being asked. Redirect, you want to always, if a client is nervous about the questions being asked or is questioning the relevance, you want to redirect the purpose of the question back to work. So I put in a little bit of an example here as to how this could be redirected. You may ask a question about a past or current substance use, which may question relevance for a client. You could respond by saying, the reason I'm asking for this information is so we can work together to discuss and plan how your substance use, if you use substances, will impact on you being able to find and maintain a job in the future. So I put in a couple of different scenarios, and the scenarios are related to a client who self-discloses as having a disability, and another client who has an undiagnosed disability or doesn't disclose that they have a disability, and how you would introduce the DRENA to the two different client types. So the first scenario is the client who discloses a disability. You may introduce the DRENA to this type of client by explaining that you would like to explore their disability further in order to ensure that you have fully considered how their disability relates to or may impact on their future employment. You want to ensure you express to the client that it is your goal to work with them to develop a plan to reduce the impact of their disability on any future employment endeavors so they have greater opportunity to achieve long-term job satisfaction and success. So the one that we experience more often, and particularly in our Vancouver Downtown East Side Center, are clients that don't disclose a disability or they are undiagnosed. So you may want to introduce the DRENA to this type of client by picking up on cues brought forward by the client during your discussions. For instance, if your client shares a story that speaks to difficulties with mood management, issues with substance use, or work-related challenges that suggest some sort of health condition, you can discuss the option of a DRENA to better understand their situation and the impact it may have on future employment. Again, you always want to ensure and reinforce the intent of the service, that it is to develop a plan that will reduce the impact of their condition situation on future employment endeavors. So I just included some additional cues that may present through conversation with your client and suggest the need for a DRENA. So these are some real examples that we've experienced in our centers. So we've had clients that have disclosed past criminal records associated to an assault, where they have indicated that they suffered a severe concussion or other injury. And so we did a bit more investigation with those clients, and through that investigation, we were able to go into a DRENA, and we had some suspicion that that person probably had some form of brain injury or physical limitation. We were able to get them connected to a specialized assessment that confirmed that they did in fact have a diagnosis. They had a diagnosed disability of a brain injury. So it was really helpful in understanding some of the reasons why that client was having some challenges in maintaining positions, any type of work position. Some other examples here are your client may disclose or they're losing or lost their license due to their involvement in a car accident. Again, you may want to investigate this more because they may have had a potential brain injury as a result of that car accident, or they might have some physical limitations as a result of that car accident. Your client may disclose that they are often tired or have difficulty sleeping. You may want to investigate this more with the client. They could be suffering from sleep apnea or mental health conditions related to depression or anxiety. Your client may present as being withdrawn, not receptive, or resistant to various employment options brought forward, even though these options are specific to their areas of interest and current skill sets. Again, you may want to investigate this more. They might have some social anxiety issues or depression. So it isn't, we're not here to diagnose. We're here to better understand the individual and potentially pull out information that might suggest further investigation. And that's what the DRENA tool will help you do. So I just want to stop for a minute to see if there's any questions at all. Greg?
Hi, Naomi. Thanks. Funny that you mentioned that. I just prompted the audience to see if there were any questions that they had. So we have one that just came in. So Naomi, I'll see if I can forward this to you. So I've just sent that question your way, but I'll read it out loud for the audience. The question is, what about administering DRENA with a non-verbal client who has support, that is parent or other provider? Is this tool still valid if information is being collected indirectly?
So with that type of individual, if they have a support person, you can work with them to complete the tool. However, my recommendation for that type of client would potentially be to look at things like discovery. The discovery assessment is going to allow you to do more observation and participation type activities that are probably going to be more relevant to an individual who is nonverbal.
Great, thanks, Naomi. Other than that, we just have a few questions about getting access to the slides. So I can let you all know that, as usual, we'll have the PDF of the slides available within a week of today. So you don't have to scramble to take notes. Everything will be there on our website. And it looks like that's all we have for, oh, we just had one more question come in. So question, someone asked the question, you say you are not diagnosing. So just going, I guess, back to the term of diagnosing, would you say that the DRENA is diagnosing?
No, the DRENA is not a diagnosis tool. Our staff, anyways, are not qualified to diagnose. They're qualified to pull out additional information that may support them being referred to a specialist for a formal diagnosis if necessary. In general, however, though, we can often use the DRENA and look at supports and accommodations that are going to work in relation to some of the symptoms or situations that they're experiencing, whether it's diagnosed or not, that are going to help them in employment.
Great, and I think we just needed that one question to come in to get the ball rolling. So we've had a few more come in, and I'll send them over to you, Naomi, but I'll also I'll say them right now. Someone asked, would a DRENA be an option for clients who disclose or present indications of addiction? How would one explain a disability assessment to someone who doesn't consider themselves disabled?
We often use, the reason why I gave the example I did is because, especially in our downtown east side, Vancouver location, addictions is a huge issue for our client population down there. And usually these individuals, whether they realize it or not, have some type of concurrent disorder. So they're using addictions to self-medicate. And they're likely undiagnosed. And so the way that we introduce it is kind of the way that I put it in the scenario, is that we talk about some of their symptoms related to it and just do a little bit more further exploration around the potential impact around the symptoms that they're having right now that they do acknowledge.
Great, okay, and then we have one more question that we'll tackle, I think, before we get back to your presentation, Naomi.
Okay.
Someone's asking, and it was the most recent one I just sent over to you, one of the reasons for why we would use a DRENA would be to provide disability supports, such as job development or customized employment or other supports.
Sorry, I can't see the questions very well, so can you just repeat that again?
Sure. This person asks, isn't one of the reasons for why we would use a DRENA to provide disability supports such as job development or customized employment or other supports?
Okay, so I think I'm reading this right. Yes, the DRENA is definitely the initial tool that helps us understand what disability-related services and supports are going to be the most appropriate and effective for that individual moving forward in their employment planning continuum.
Okay, great. And one person also asked about customized employment webinars. We actually have hosted a couple of those here at the center. So you're able to go back to our website and view those full recordings if you'd like some more information about customized employment specifically. Okay, so I think with that, Naomi, we'll mute ourselves here at the center and we'll pass it back over to you for the presentation.
Okay, great. Okay, so I'm just going to talk a little bit about the tool specifics before we get into reviewing the actual tool. So the DRENA, what we have found, it generally takes between 2 to 4 hours to complete, depending on the client and the complexity of their disability. Case managers usually like to print and laminate the DRENA wheel. That was the visual that I showed you earlier, and I will show it to you again. So there is a visual reference throughout the interview with the client. They like to just have it right on their desk. The case manager can type the notes that come from the interview directly into the DRENA tool, or they can print the form and write notes in as they go through the questions with the clients, whatever their preference is. Now, because for those of you who work in the EPBC contract and are familiar with ICM, any type of interactive tool that avoids you having to print out, get a signature, scan, upload, and then attach back into the attachment folder in the client's case, I did create this form in Adobe to allow the case manager to complete all sections of the tool directly on the computer, if preferred, and drag and drop directly into the client case attachment folder in ICM, if applicable to your agency. So now we'll get started with going through the actual tool. What I'm going to just show you really quickly from this page is that if you order the tool, where the Open Door Group logo is right now, that is where your logo would be. So we will recreate the tool with your logo in it. The copyright information about it being Open Door Group at the very bottom will stay there, however. Okay, so I'm just going to exit out of this and open up the actual tool. Okay, so I'm going to make this smaller and bigger. I want to get you guys to have a sense of how the page is laid out, but then I'll go in so you can see the different sections a little bit more clearly. So as you can see from this tool, you can easily type into the bottom, if my little cursor doesn't keep going up, the assessment start date and the assessment complete date. And I'll just make it bigger. I'll go to the next page, actually. Each page has tabs at the top that will help you go through the different pages of the document more easily. Everywhere there is a date, it will automatically pop up a date, a calendar for you, so it just streamlines that process for you a little bit more easily. And then every section that you type into does expand so that you have the ability to put more information into each section if needed. And this is a savable and editable document, so you can go in and edit and update it as you need to. I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger. So for those agencies that are not EPBC specific that are on the call today, this would not be in your form, EPBC case. I would leave it, I'll leave it here as case number so that it can just be specific to whether or not you have a case number, or you can just leave it blank. Also, current tier based on MD&A, this would be taken out as well. So the first page is really a quick snapshot for the reader around the individual. This is likely going to be completed by you after you've completed the interview with the client. You would put in the primary disability type, which you will know by the time you complete the DRENA potentially, or you will have some suspicion of what the disability type may be. And then you would put in some point form details around the primary symptoms of that disability, so just a really quick snapshot. You can tick off here whether or not it's medically verified or not, whether it's a congenital condition, or whether it's an acquired condition. So something in which it was recently acquired because of a car accident or some other situation that occurred for that individual. And again, you can put the date that it was acquired. As you go through the interview process, you will be asking about medical or assessment documentation that could verify their disability, or if they have anything that they would be willing to share or provide to us that would give us more depth to help us complete this document. If they do have past medical or assessment documentation, this is where you would note it in this section. And again, as you go through the process, the interview process with the client, you'll also be asking about supports or professionals that are involved in your client's life. If they identify them, this is where you would put the information as well. So just going to the next page, this is the DRENA reference chart that most of my case managers anyways print off, and we get it laminated for them, and they just have it on their desk to refer to as they go through the interview with the client. And then you'll see, and I'll just make this smaller again so you can see it from a page reference, from a full page reference. Is you can see how each page is set out. So each quadrant is broken down. It gives you kind of an overview of things that you should be considering in this section, or things you should be asking about in this section. The tool that I'm showing you right now is the actual reference guide. This would be blank, this section that you would be using with the client. But in order to be able to support staff who are new to delivering the DRENA, or to be able to give staff some sort of ideas around the type of questions they should be asked, we've created this tool that this list of questions that sort of starts to prompt the conversation. So just to be really clear, the list of the questions below is to help generate conversations specific to each quadrant area. Case managers or practitioners are encouraged to expand on responses that come from the questions below to ensure you are achieving all the details needed to better understand your client's disability in relation to employment. Ensure you are also observing the client's body language. For example, are they having to shift their position regularly to feel comfortable? Are they distracted by environmental noises? Do they struggle to read and see the DRENA wheel? Are they cautious about sitting, suggesting perhaps a back injury? Were they limping, breathing heavily, etc., between the walk from the reception area to the office? You really want to look at some other cues through your own observations that can add value to the information that you're getting. You don't want to be fully reliant on client report here. So make sure you have your eyes peeled. So as you'll see, there's some questions. There's questions in each one of the sections to help pull out the information. This first quadrant is very specific to physical and sensory disabilities and their impacts. In each of the sections as well, you want to make sure that you're asking whether or not you want to find out what their strategies or what their understanding of their disability is. So if they have specific strategies related to their disability, you're going to understand very quickly what their awareness level is in relation to their disability. Some people may not have any strategies or not have any sort of coping capacity around their disability, and this is really important to note as well, because that is where you're going to start looking at different supports to help them develop those strategies. So going to the next section, and so all the sections are very similar in this area. You'll see again that there's a list of questions here to help you get started in your conversation with the client. In this section, some of the things that you want to be observing, because this is related to cognitive and mental health impacts, are things like does the client provide eye contact when you're speaking to them? Do they lose focus in the middle of questions or responses? For example, do they ask you to repeat the question more than one time? Do you have to reword your question so they comprehend what you are asking? Are they providing responses that have no relevance to the question being asked? Do they sit hunched over and closed off, legs crossed, arms crossed? Can you visually see them sweating? So, those are just some ideas of things that you may potentially observe. It could go way beyond that. But you really want to make sure that you're including your observations in the discussions that you're having with the client. And again, there's a list of questions here that just will help trigger some ideas around where you want to go with your conversation. It's really not recommended that you have this list of questions and you're going through them one by one with the client. That is not the intent of using this tool. It's supposed to be a natural conversational assessment. And so, you might need to reference this until you become comfortable with going through the DRENA process. Having a quick reference is a conversation slowing down where you could maybe pull another question to help get it going again. The general impacts, again, are broken down, and so there's some questions to help you address different areas. So we always, with everything that we do, we always include current and past addictions in all of our assessment tools. Addictions generally, well, it can play a large role in somebody's disability, and that's the reason why we always include it. Personal presentation, sleep patterns and drowsiness, and personal awareness of health are the areas in this section. So this is, now you're starting to establish how does this disability impact them in their everyday living, how they present, what are their patterns throughout the day. These are starting to give you a larger picture of the individual and the impact of their disability in every aspect of their life. And then moving on to the last quadrant is considerations and supports. So this is where you're really starting to identify any work-related needs, accommodations, and considerations. Who are the supports in the individual's life? What role do they play in that person's life? What role could they potentially play in supporting that individual find and maintain employment? what medications are they on currently, and do those medications have certain side effects that we need to consider in relation to when they work? For example, if the medication makes them weary, when do they take it? So we're making sure that we don't look for work opportunities for them that are during a period of the day where they're probably going to feel very tired or drowsy. One of the other questions we often like to ask around medication as well is, in the past, have you ever stopped or felt like stopping your medication because you are feeling good and don't think you need it any longer? Was it supported by your physician or psychiatrist? Is this something you may want to consider in the future? This is a really important question to ask. Also, do you know and understand the impact discontinuing your medication would have on your health? We've had a lot of experiences where clients will be on medication, they're feeling really good, and then they'll decide to go off their medication, and it results in a breakdown of pretty much everything in their life, including work. And so we want to have that discussion with clients around their medication to make sure that they're aware of how the medication helps them, so that they don't risk going off of the medication if it's not supported by their physician. We want to help them maintain that employment. So that's one of the areas that we do like to ask as well. Also, when it comes to work-related needs, accommodations, and considerations, we always like to ask the clients, what do they think they would help them in a work environment? So knowing their disability, and after you've had this discussion and you've been reviewing some of these questions, based on this, this, and this, what type of things do you think would support you to be more comfortable in work and to be able to maintain work? So getting them included in that process. So once the 3 sections or the 4 sections are done, there's a large space available for the summary, so you can summarize your findings. I've included a link in the training guide or the reference guide to Open Door Group website, where we have a multitude of disability fact sheets on a ton of different disabilities. And you can go in there, and what's really great for people who are new to potentially working with people with disabilities, or not fully aware of a disability and the potential impact, and don't really have a sense of where to start around, accommodations or supports that might benefit them. These disability fact sheets have all of that information in there for you to at least start you to at least move you in the right way or right direction to start pulling together a plan that's going to be really effective for your clients. So I encourage you to go in here and look at those if you need them. There's also a lot of resources available through different sites. I think that you had mentioned one, Kathy.
There's a website called Job Accommodation Network, which is very well organized in the fact that you can basically just go in and search by disability for related work accommodations. The lists are very comprehensive, so you might not use all of those accommodations for each client, but it's basically finding the themes for that client's situation so that you can pull out appropriate ones and then discuss those with the client.
And so I'll put that link into the reference guide as well, so that you have that information when you're going through this process as well. So there's tons of space in here. I thought the more space, the better. You don't have to use all of this, but at least it gives you the option to use it. So service recommendations. So this is built in here. A lot of these service recommendations are specific to the employment program of BC. These are typical service recommendations that generally come out of our DRENAs that our staff do. For agencies outside of the EPBC program, I will leave this page open, but this would be blank here, so it would look more like this. Other services not mentioned above, it would just be a blank spot where you could add that information in around services or supports you're referring to or recommendations. I just included, again, because this is a reference guide, A rationale should detail why the service is needed and how it will assist the client to improve their readiness for employment and or achieve labor market attachment. And so the ones that we regularly refer to are discovery and customized employment development services out of the DRENA, and we don't refer to all of them for the same person, but these are ones where we might take advantage of upon completion. So also employment readiness workshops. The ones that we tend to use the most out of the DRENA is the disability management workshop that we do with clients, as well as an addictions management workshop we do with clients. We also engage in a lot of employment readiness type workshops and more of the prepare and maintain employment, as well as the essential skills topics workshops that are available through the employment program of BC. We also often refer to placement support, job development services, unpaid work experiences, and then job coaching services as well. If we do refer to, if somebody presents as having a disability, it's not diagnosed, but we suspect that maybe there's more to that disability where there would be a great benefit for that client to receive a formalized diagnosis, we will refer them to a specialized assessment. I have put in drop-down boxes, so it has all the different assessments specific to disability that are available through the employment program of BC, and I think that these are quite relevant even outside of the employment program of BC. However, if there isn't one in this list, you have type-overability in this box as well. So let me see, what can I put in here? I'll put in language. So you can put it in there too. So you don't have to be reliant on the drop-down, it's just there more for your convenience. And then if you're referring a client to a community agency, say they don't have any housing or something like that, or they need some mental health counseling, you can indicate that in here and the rationale as to why you're doing that. And then, of course, there's another box as well. So just another option if none of the services above relate to what you're wanting to refer the client to or what recommended service you want to refer them to. So for recommended worksite accommodations, we have put together a little bit of a list that's available right within the DRENA for your convenience. We do really recommend that you look at those references that we provided as well in the reference tool, because this is just kind of a really quick list, but there may be some better ideas that you could put in here that are more specific to what would work with your client. So, you know, for physical disabilities, these are some ideas of recommended worksite accommodations. For a cognitive disability, here's some suggestions. Sensory disability, for hearing, visual, environmental sensitivities, and then also for mental health, here's some suggestions for worksite accommodations. In each of the sections, there's the ability to put additional ones in there. So, you know, that's why you may want to go to some of those other links, and there might be something that's more relevant to the client that you would like to include in here. Now, keeping in mind that these are worksite accommodations that you're suggesting upon completion of the DRENA. However, you're not going to really fully know what type of work accommodations that client is going to require until they actually get a job. Depending on the environment, depending on the employer and what the workspace looks like, they may already have a lot of those supports available within that work environment. So, you know, you might need to go back to this list and look at, you know, making some adjustments to this later in your service delivery with your client. So just to go back, I'm just going to go back up to this page. When you're looking at a specialized assessment, you can click on this box and it'll take you to a reference page that gives you a quick overview of the different types of specialized assessments and what they provide for you. You know, what detailed information they'll give you if you need that. And then you can go back to the rationale page again easily. And that's it. That's the end of the form. You have the ability to put your name in and sign it off. If you have signature pads, you can do that right in there. And then you can print the form if you would like to as well. So that is an overview of the tool and how to use it. And so I'm just wondering if maybe we can go back and see if there's any questions around that piece right now.
Hi there, Naomi. Thanks very much for going over that tool. We did indeed have a number of questions that came in that were specifically related to the DRENA. So I'm just going to quickly send a few of those your way.
Mm-hmm.
One person asked the question, would you say that the DRENA replaces the discovery?
No, absolutely not. The discovery process is it's a much more intensive and thorough process. You are really doing a lot of different activities with the client to understand their ideal conditions of employment. We do, Open Door Group has recently, I've recently developed some discovery guidebooks to assist staff who are delivering discovery, and it's a very, very intensive, much more thorough process. The DRENA is really just giving you more of a snapshot into what the disability is, what sort of recommendations may come out of that. It's not intended to really fully understand what or where the unique contributions of the client would be in a work environment. The discovery is exploring more things around strengths, interests in relation to employment in a very non-traditional way.
Okay, thanks. And I think maybe a good question to follow that up with, there's a question on do you know if there's an intention on the part of EPBC to require a DRENA to be completed in order to make these types of service recommendations as listed on your form?
I don't think that there is a requirement to make service recommendations like job development services or any of those things. It is recommended that they go through a DRENA. They don't even need to go through a DRENA to go into customized employment, because customized employment is now open to all specialized populations, not just individuals with disabilities. So there isn't a requirement to go through the DRENA to access these other services, no.
Okay. The next question, a person is asking about the amount of time that should be spent and how to kind of work through that whole process. So this person says 2 to 4 hours might be a long time to keep a person engaged. Do you typically break this into 2 to 4 meetings?
Yes.
The person's concern is that employment planning or job search won't take place until many meetings in, and clients might become frustrated.
No, and that's exactly what you need to do, and that's why introducing the DRENA to the client is so critical, and how you do that is so critical. Usually the way that our staff do it is they'll do it over a couple of appointments. They'll book 2-hour appointments at a time and do it. If it's going to take up to 4 hours, I know that there seems like there's a lot of information in here, but you're not, because this is a natural type of conversation you're having with the client, there's a lot of questions that are in this reference guide that may not be relevant to your clients, right? Because they don't have that specific disability or even symptoms around that disability type. So just to keep that in mind, this is really, the DRENA tool is designed to create efficiencies, but also ensure that you're getting the effective information you need in order to move forward with that person. But yeah, like you can't force somebody to do this, to go through this process. When you're introducing it, if somebody identifies as a disability, you know, you're reviewing their past work history, and you know it's clear that there's been an impact on their success in that past work history because of their disability. You know, that's when you need to really have that conversation with the client and say, based on, your past work history, it may not be a bad idea to look at, perhaps how your disability is impacting you and what we can do to support you so that you don't continue to have challenges in jobs that you're getting into.
I think some of that time is also for administrative use, and so it's a matter of once you've met with that client, some of that time is to pull the information together and research some of those, if you need to, those accommodations through some of those online resources as well. So that's built into the time as well.
Kathy, on average, how much time does it usually take you to do a DRENA?
On average, I would say I spend maybe an hour and a half with a client directly, and then there may be some time going through some assessments they've provided me, using some of those accommodation resources, and possibly consulting with some of their professional support.
Yeah. So that was one of the things that I did mention, is that I failed to mention, is that when you're collecting the support information, and there is questions in the reference side around this, if the person identifies professional support or support that help them with their daily activities, trying to get a consent from that person so that you're able to contact them to get more information about their disability and how they think it may impact them in employment. It just adds a little bit of extra insight into understanding the individual and what considerations you may need to make in order to make sure you're putting together the right accommodations and services and supports moving forward.
Okay, thanks to both of you for that really thorough response. A question, just a very technical question about, I think, a form or field at the beginning of the DRENA. Someone's asking if you can add additional people into the support person field.
Yeah, I could certainly do that. I also was thinking that if there's additional supports, you could put them just in here. The reason why I didn't put in a ton of supports into the DRENA is because this is something that you also pull for if somebody has a ton of different supports in their life that are helping them with their daily activities, that they really need that support. In all likelihood, that person's probably going to end up maybe going into discovery. And in discovery, you would be pulling a more comprehensive list together because you would definitely be looking at natural support that would be helping them achieve and maintain employment. But I can put in more support if that's what they would like.
Okay. And maybe just one or two questions before we move along. Someone's asking specifically about how you do things at Open Door Group and is wondering if disability management and addictions management workshops are something that you offer.
We don't do a disability management workshop in a group. We find that the information is too sensitive and too specific to the individual, so we generally just do it one-on-one, and we have basically a form that we go through that helps clients plan how they address their disabilities. So what risk factors are present that are going to cause them to relapse, what triggers generally cause them to relapse or cause them to feel a certain way, and then how are they going to develop strategies so that it doesn't impact their stability in work. So no, we don't have a specific workshop we go to, but we definitely do have a form, a tool that helps take a client through that process. I can definitely talk to the BC Centre for Employment Excellence about that and look at whether or not it would be worthwhile to do a webinar session on that as well.
We also use, there's some tools available publicly through some different resources, or one of the websites is Here to Help, that I know a lot of people who work for interior health and mental health services use. And so we would be using some of those tools to help with that process as well.
Okay, and let's take one more question before we move along. So someone's asking, going back to the discovery process, and just wondering if you do a DRENA and then a discovery, like would you do a DRENA for sure and then a discovery if needed?
You don't have to. There's no requirement to do a DRENA before going into discovery. If the person has a disability and you want to get some more information about that disability to help you make a decision whether or not discovery would be an appropriate next service, then I would recommend a DRENA.
Great. Okay. So thanks again to the audience for submitting your questions. We had a lot of them come in, and hopefully we were able to get to most of them. So Naomi, we'll pass it back over to you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Those are some good questions. Greg, if there's people on this call that are interested in knowing more about disability management and addictions management, how would they be able to could they just send an email to you guys?
Let's do that as a start, and then we'll figure that out, because certainly I think this is piquing a lot of interest, and I think the intention is also to build the capacity and the knowledge there. So send to Greg or the center an email, and then we'll follow up with that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks. And one quick question, Naomi. Going back to the DRENA itself, will you be giving some final instructions at the end about how to access that? I know you mentioned it already earlier in the presentation, but a couple of people.
Yeah, you bet. That's my last screen.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to now turn the microphone over to Kathy Collins, who is a vocational counselor in our Kamloops office with Open Door Group, and she is going to present a case study on her client, Michelle. As I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, we're very pleased to have Michelle with us today. She is going, and why it's so great to have her here is because she's going to provide a receiver or client perspective of what it was like to go through this service. So I'll just pass the microphone over, and Kathy can get started.
Hey, thanks, Naomi. Hi, everybody. So just to kind of do a preamble to the information you see on your screen, Michelle initially came in and we did an initial needs assessment where she did disclose having fibromyalgia, osteoarthritis, and an anxiety disorder. So I was able to introduce the idea of having a DRENA done at that appointment to explain the purpose of it, as well as kind of just give her the heads up that if she has any previous assessment information that she could bring it to that appointment and it would help us move through the tool. And she was able to actually bring a copy of her PWD application form, which was very helpful in this process. So the first section that we talk about is the physical and sensory impacts. So again, because she already disclosed a diagnosis of fibromyalgia, that's basically the jumping off point. I was able to ask her about that diagnosis, when she was diagnosed. What we know is that with a new diagnosis, it may not be as stable for the person. They may be working with medications and a treatment plan. And if they've had the condition for a longer time, then that might speak to having developed some coping skills and worked with it, with the condition as well, so know some accommodations. So that's just kind of the background to that. You always need to still check those perceptions. But it's just a place to start. So Michelle was able to let me know about her fibromyalgia, that she was diagnosed in 2010. She was able to give me an idea of some of her symptoms related to sore muscles, fatigue. We talked a bit about the brain fog that can come with that condition. She was able to talk about some things she was able to do as well related to things like changing her diet, accessing some professional supports around wellness, a body worker, that type of thing to help manage her symptoms. She was able to talk to me about her osteoarthritis as well. She'd had certain areas tested, her neck and her spine, but she also believed that it was in her shoulders and hips as well. So that was a relatively new diagnosis coming out in 2013. Symptoms of that were around pain in her shoulders and hips daily. She described it as pretty much almost continually a 10 out of 10 for pain, for her degree of pain. We also talked about some of the effects pain can have on a person daily, which are, in her case, were related to her ability to concentrate. So this spoke to, when we talked a bit more about her symptoms in depth, we talked about some of the things around she can have fatigue at the end of the day, her pain worsens at the end of the day. So those were all clues as to accommodations that would come out of this. And I'll speak more to the accommodations and recommendations after we go through each of these quadrants. It can also speak to recommendations for services around possibly an occupational therapy assessment, those types of things. So those were all clues that came out of that section. When we talked about her cognitive and mental health, she was comfortable disclosing that she'd been diagnosed with an anxiety disorder. She'd also reported that in the MD&A, so I didn't have to dig much for that information. She was very free with that information. So we just used this session as a way to gather some of the additional information on her actual diagnosis, the symptoms, impact on work, those types of things. She talked about having difficulties managing too much stress, having difficulties processing certain information, some of her frustrations with her medical supports, and then just some of the physical symptoms of her anxiety around having her heart racing, having more pain in different areas, feeling shaky, it affecting her ability to think clearly, that fight or flight response. And I also used kind of this area to talk about some of her healthy stress management techniques, which she was able to identify around things like meditating, her diet, using a therapeutic pool, those types of things. Because again, if somebody doesn't have strategies in place for stress management, if we know stress is affecting their condition, then it just may speak to recommendations down the road. We also talk about triggers, because triggers are going to be things we want to consider for work accommodations as well. Then in the next section, we talk about those general impacts. So I screened her for any issues with non-prescription drug use or alcohol use, ensured she was taking her prescription medications as prescribed. There were no concerns there. The area that came out, the area of potential concern that came out of this section was related to sleep management. So her pain will impact her ability to sleep. On average, she was getting about 5 to 8 hours of sleep anyways, but it was basically that pain can interrupt her sleep. So that, again, may speak to a possible recommendation. When we did explore this issue a bit, we talked about, because it was related to pain and she had professional supports in place to help manage her pain around the body worker, her prescription pain medication, those types of things, she had some strategies she was using to work through that already. So the last section is around considerations and support. So we always ask about medications. Again, so she disclosed that she'd been taking Demerol since 2011. So that right away speaks to the degree of her pain, because not everyone can get a prescription pain medication for their pain. We explore some side effects of that medication as it relates to employment. So in this case, there can be feelings of nausea and grogginess if needing to take too many. We also talked about how often she takes it. So, I mean, if she was taking it several times a day, every day, that would be an indicator of the level of pain. And in this case, it was basically she, I believe, taken it once a week. We talked about it, and had taken it once a few weeks ago prior to that. So that tells me that some of the other things she's doing to manage her pain seem to be working for her. I also explore past hospitalizations. So in Michelle's case, there was nothing that would indicate anything else we need to look at. But again, as Naomi was talking about, it can speak to you know, how severe some mental health conditions would be if they were recently hospitalized for mental health conditions, or may speak to needing to explore some things around physical limitations, possible brain injuries, those types of things. In this section, we also look at personal and disability support. So, and again, this all informs the recommendations. For personal support, in Michelle's case, she was connected to supported housing through Elizabeth Fry. So she had some neighbors who she was able to reach out to for support. She has a few family members in town, and the type of support they provide, so whether it's emotional, financial, some support to help people with transportation, those types of things. We also explored her professional supports, because that can speak to referrals to community resources. In her case, she's currently accessing, we have a mental health clubhouse in town that she was able to access for some funding for a course she was looking to take, but she'd never been to interior health services, mental health services in the past. And she also had identified several people that were on her team related to her physical health conditions, so showing that she had some supports in that area as well. So I'm just going to go through some of the recommendations. So the first one I talk about is, again, just showing that she has those professional supports in place for her health issues, and listing off who they would be and the types of support they can provide. The second piece is around maintaining personal supports for her emotional support. We talk about continuing to practice the healthy stress management techniques that she's already identified, and what those are. Again, if she didn't have those types of supports, it may speak to doing some one-to-one disability management, or if she was finding those supports were not providing the level of support she needed, we could do that. Continue to access the CMHA Clubhouse. She'd applied for some funding for a course she wanted to take that relates to upgrading for just some of her long-term career goals. There's a recommendation around interior health mental health services, just in the event that her mental health symptoms start to impact her ability to participate in services or her employment placement. And basically with the recommendation, I would never recommend that somebody has to access a service, but basically just that they would benefit from accessing an intake appointment to determine if any of the supports of that agency would be helpful to them. In this case, Michelle, during this appointment, expressed most interest in pursuing self-employment in bookkeeping. So she had some success with self-employment in the past, but was unable to continue with that line of work due to her physical limitations. So we had talked to, and again, it's just the way that the Work BC services work in this office. We had talked about her continuing to work with an employment advisor to do some exploration around that and possibly be referred to Community Futures. There's a recommendation that she participate in a self-employment program on a part-time basis to accommodate her physical limitations. And then just a recommendation around some of the workshops we do internally related to networking, just to help her develop her skills for marketing herself to clients. I make a recommendation for a referral to ATBC. So that's Assistive Technology British Columbia, and they do assessments for us related to assistive technology and adaptive equipment. And so once she started that business, a referral to them to see if there's any actual equipment we could provide that would help her be able to work longer and reduce the impact of her limitations on that employment. We also talked about once her business is launched that she would benefit from an ergonomic assessment with an occupational therapist to set up an appropriate workspace, and again, to just maximize her work hours. When we look at the accommodations for that disability, again, this is where I do a lot of this work after I've already met with the client. Some of that, if I have an idea from the actual DRENA, I will discuss those accommodations with the client during that appointment, just to again, get a feel from them if I'm on the right track in understanding their needs. We talked about part-time hours being ideal just to ease her return to work, as well as accommodate her symptoms, those physical limitations, as well as the stress that full-time work can have on people's mental health. Because of her fibromyalgia, and she identified some previous car accidents and that she was not sure kind of which limitations were related to which. What we did know was basically that she had restrictions related to lifting, bending, standing, and reaching. So the recommendation that she pursue sedentary employment that's flexible to allow her to change positions as needed throughout the day. Not working in a position where tasks are highly repetitive. So when we talked about triggers for her condition, she talked about just repetitive motions of her shoulders, I believe it was, that can just cause that pain to really progress. So needing to avoid that in any work tasks. A schedule that's flexible to accommodate her symptoms when her symptoms prevent her from working. Ideally a position that allows her to work from home when necessary because she has complete control over that environment. A flexible break schedule so that she can practice any sort of mental health coping strategies or stretches that she needs to do to manage her symptoms as needed throughout the day. We talk about a position where duties either reduce or avoid triggering her symptoms. So that's where we've done some of that work previously in the DRENA to explore those specific triggers, and I just identify them here so that it's clearly laid out. In her case, it was moving around too much. There was an issue with needing to wear, like if she would be needed to wear any sort of tight clothing, that can be a problem. Overstimulation and overuse of her right arm. We'd also talked about just personally, kind of Michelle's personality being that she's a people pleaser, and so the idea that self-employment will help reduce her need to push herself to please that employer. Now, what's interesting in Michelle's case is as she worked through this process with her employment advisor, there was actually an opportunity for more mainstream employment. And so we were still able to use these recommendations and accommodations because we looked at the fact that she was hired by somebody who knows her, so would be an understanding and supportive employer, and they are aware of her needs and that people pleaser piece to make sure that doesn't affect her ability to just push herself too far. We talked a bit about recommendations, accommodations related to a schedule. So the majority of work to be done at the beginning of the day. When we had talked about her conditions earlier, she had reported that her pain increases at the end of the day, which impacts her concentration, and also that fatigue increases by the end of the day. And then just some additional strategies to minimize her concentration issues that can be associated with fibromyalgia. Again, these are some general accommodations. Providing written job instructions wherever possible, support prioritizing assignments, using memory aids, so schedulers, calendars, things like that, and minimizing distractions in the work environment. And this is just an idea of kind of how services went for Michelle after she met with me. So she worked with an employment advisor, and she started the process to go to self-employment services with Community Futures. That was when she received a job offer, and so we looked at doing the referral to ATBC at that point in time. They completed an assistive technology assessment with Michelle over the phone and basically made the recommendations to me that she receive a laptop, have a trackball mouse, an external keyboard, dictation headset, speech recognition software, Sage Pro software, which is related to the type of work she was doing, and a wireless printer, scanner, and fax. Again, a lot of this is so she has the flexibility to work from home when needed and change her position when working at home or working with her employer. And it also comes with 3 months of technology support through ATBC to help her kind of navigate her way through all of this technology. So at this point in time, it's about being connected to follow-up services for support maintaining that position.
Great. So Michelle.
Hi. The DRENA program has been a life-changing experience for me, and it has had a positive and restorative impact on not only my life, but my son's as well. For years, I've been struggling with extreme pain and very little hope of ever getting out of the physical and economic nightmare that is my life. I had no idea that the Open Door Group could provide me with the adaptive equipment needed to get me back to work. By using the DRENA as a tool, Kathy learned about my past experience, my physical challenges, and my hopes for the future. I felt the questions I was asked spoke to my individual concerns, and this assessment enabled the Open Door Group to provide me with real solutions. I was given viable and attainable recommendations that were suited for my particular needs. I have hope again. One of the most valuable experiences was being able to express myself without being rushed. I felt very comfortable disclosing the particulars of my medical situation to my counselor. I actually felt like I was heard and that my health concerns were understood. The counselor was really supportive of the fact that I never gave up trying to improve my situation. Their advice was helpful. I learned of other avenues to explore in the community, and when my situation changed from considering self-employment to getting an actual job offer, they were extremely helpful and adaptive in order to get me working as soon as possible. I felt valued, appreciated, and able to move ahead. It is exciting and energizing to start this new path, and I know I am succeeding already because I'm now working and my belief in myself has skyrocketed. Concrete examples of the options that were available was very useful to me, and I feel that the DRENA is an effective tool to help assess clients' employment needs and to provide viable solutions for success.
Thanks, Michelle. That's great. And Kathy as well for providing that case study. So I just wanted to go through just really quickly. I have one more slide, and then we'll open it up for questions again. We've already talked a little bit about this, possible service interventions and referrals after the DRENA. So this is obviously not an inclusive list, and this is also not a requirement that you have to have a DRENA done before you can refer a client to these services. Again, these ones speak to being potentially employment program of BC specific, but there are things within this that could be relevant to external agencies as well. So obviously, discovery and customized employment development services may be an avenue you want to go down because you require to more exploratory around the individual. Job development services, an unpaid work experience is also another great avenue to assess a person's disability in a real-life work scenario. So you've done the DRENA and they've identified that this is how the disability impacts them. You then want to set up an unpaid work experience to verify that. Disability and or addictions management planning, so we talked about that already. Other prepare, maintain, or essential skills workshops, so whatever workshops you have available within your respective agencies that would assist the person in addressing some of the things that may have came out of the DRENA. A specialized assessment referral, a community support referral in connection, program participation in our job search disability financial support, job coaching upon achieving employment, job start disability financial supports upon achieving employment, and Kathy gave a really good example of that with assistive technology BC equipment that Michelle received, and job maintenance and follow-up services. So working with the client throughout the first year of employment to make sure that they maintain that job and integrating any supports along the way if required. So accessing the DRENA tool, if this is something, after going through this review, is something that you're interested in potentially using in your own agency, an order form will be accessible for download on the BC Centre for Employment Excellence website by, I believe, this Thursday, April 2nd. Whenever the webinar goes up onto the BC Centre for Employment Excellence, the form will also be in the same area, I understand. That's what, I'm pretty sure that's true. Greg, maybe you can verify that for me. So this order form will ask for the following information: a contact name, a contact email. It will also ask for your agency type. So are you a Work BC Centre or are you outside of Work BC? Because we'll make some alterations to the form to be relevant to the work that you do. And we'll also need your organization's logo in a JPEG format. The DRENA is being provided for free to organizations that would like to use the tool as long as they have gone through this training. And the DRENA form will be provided to you with your logo on it within 2 weeks of receiving your order form. Because this is an open door group copywritten document, we request that this form not be altered without prior written consent by open door group. And that is it. So I'll just open it up for further questions or any final questions.
Okay, thank you so much, Naomi, and Michelle and Kathy as well. Really appreciate taking the time to present today. We do have some time left to take questions, as you mentioned, and maybe I'll just address the location of the order form. That's exactly right, Naomi. So we will send out either the link or the form itself in the follow-up email that goes out after this webinar. And then they'll be able to link to the form as well as the recording and the slides on our website. So that should be pretty straightforward. So maybe taking a few questions now. I sent a few of those questions to Naomi. But maybe we'll start with this question about, specific to ICM, but might be useful to a lot of you out there. So the tool is very thorough. Just wondering if there's any concerns around the breadth of information being gathered and scanning that into ICM.
Well, ICM is supposed to be a secure environment, and so I can't imagine there being any issues with that. There shouldn't be.
It's also in, like, I think there just needs to be care in how people actually document things in terms of making sure that they're documenting, like, factual observations, what they see, not making assumptions in their summary. It needs to be a professionally written document.
Okay. And another question is, someone made the comment that the tool seems to cover similar ground to a formal assessment, like a vocational psychological assessment. Is there any kind of qualification that's required for case managers to use the DRENA, or any prerequisites or qualifications?
Well, I spoke to it more in the beginning. Our vocational counselors generally have some sort of social work degree or background in social work and have experience working, well, several years experience working with people with disabilities. The layout is similar, you're right. The layout of the information is similar to what you would get out of a psych voc. However, unlike a psych voc or a specialized assessment, we're not doing formalized testing. So this is really just basically information that is being provided to us by the client. It's self-report. There's no testing done to verify that information. The recommendations that do come out of it are based on our own observations and what the client is self-reporting, and what we understand based on the research that's done and some of the typical recommendations that would come out of somebody who has that type of disability. So I can see how people would look at it and go, yeah, it looks a lot like a psych voc, the recommendations that come out of it, and certainly we're influenced by that a little bit because we've worked with different specialized assessors for so many years, but I would definitely not say that it's on the same level at all.
Okay, thank you. And it looks like questions are starting to slow down. There's a question about, specifically about assistive technology BC, and maybe anyone out there might know the answer to this and is welcome to chime in. So someone's asking if ATBC can be, if they can come remotely if you don't live in the area where they are. Do you know the answer to that question, Naomi, or is anyone else?
Yeah, so this is Kathy. So when we refer people, because we're based out of Kamloops and assistive technology is based out of Vancouver, so a lot of what they do when they're doing their assessments will be via phone, or they'll access like the computer services remotely if they need to. They usually do kind of a traveling roadshow a couple of times throughout the interior, throughout the year, and so they'll connect with some clients may not be able to access their services through the phone or with remote assistance. They need a face-to-face, and so they'll do that when they travel throughout the interior.
Okay. Thanks, Kathy. It looks like no more questions are coming in, so I think I'll just take this moment to thank you once again at Open Door Group, Naomi, Kathy, and Michelle, and we will pass it back over to Susanna to do just a quick wrap-up of the webinar today.
I echo Greg's thanks to our presenters. That was awesome. I just want to remind everyone that this will be posted on our website, and if you want to go back to it, to the recording, and also to maybe to listening to certain parts again, you're welcome to do that, and that's what it's for. I do have a question, Naomi. You mentioned that in terms of access to the tool, that and I just want to verify that you want people to be actually having taken this training before using the tool, or is it okay for people to ask for the tool and then to go ahead and use it at their organizations?
My preference would be that they go through the training so they understand how the tool works. However, I know that you guys are uploading the webinar to your website, so people, I think more than anything, what we'll probably be doing, Susanna, is just referring them to review that.
Okay, that's great. So maybe when we send out And in the audience, if you want to share it with your colleagues, just maybe remind them that, you know, the training session is on, you know, on our website, and they should refer to it first and then use the tool.
Okay.
Great.
So thanks again, and you can see here that we have an upcoming webinar that will be taking place later on in the month of April. This is Strengthening Business to Achieve Higher Performance, and it's about business process management in the nonprofit sector. The team here at the center that has been working on this project will be presenting some of the findings and the lessons from the development stage of this project, and that webinar will be open for registration soon on our website, and our newsletter will be going out this week, so you'll be able to check all that information and registration information in your inbox if you're on our mailing list. So again, we will send out all of the information about the webinar in the follow-up email that will go out on Thursday, including the link to the form for the order form for the DRENA, as well as the full recording of the webinar if you missed it or if you'd like to share it with any of your colleagues. And the slides as well will be available for download. So with that, I'd like to thank the team here, my colleague Susanna, and everyone out there, all of you for tuning in. We really appreciate you taking the time to view this webinar and the overview and training of the DRENA today. So have a great afternoon, everyone, and we hope that you can join us at our next webinar.